Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In this episode of A Moment in History, let's explore one of the most ironic American heroes of World War II. Now, I say this man was ironic because he was a war hero, yet he refused to kill. It may not seem to make much sense at first glance, but this man, a Christian who believed he should not take the life of anyone, even his mortal enemies, served his country as a medic on the battlefield, constantly putting his own life in danger to help his brothers on the battlefield. Let's discover the American and Christian hero of the Second World War, Desmond Doss. Like many young American men in his generation, Doss answered the call to defend his country from the Axis powers during World War II. In the spring of 1942, he joined the 77th Infantry Division as a medic. Now, Doss stood out among his peers in the U.S. Army, namely as a man who refused, based on his Christian convictions, to carry a gun and use it against the enemy. For this, Doss was often tormented by his fellow soldiers. But he became famous as a silent soldier of the battlefield who, time after time, was the first to answer the cry for a medic on the battlefield. Remember, he carried no weapon, so he always put himself in great danger when he answered the call, but he answered it still, saving hundreds of Allied soldiers during his years of service from 1942 to 1945. Of course, the most famous incident involving Doss happened in the spring of 1945, as the Allies were pushing the Axis to the brink of surrender. Doss and his men were stationed in the Pacific Theater near Okinawa on a cliff called Hacksaw Ridge. The Americans were under heavy fire and losing countless men. High Command had told the men to retreat, but Doss, knowing there were countless wounded Americans at the ridge, returned to the melee. His mission, save as many Allied lives as possible. Now, Doss relied on his faith in God and his love for his brothers to perform a truly heroic action on behalf of others. As he returned to enemy fire time after time to assist and help a wounded American soldier to safety, he prayed this prayer: "Dear God, let me get just one more man." He got more than just one. On that faithful day in May of 1945, Desmond Doss rescued as many as 75 soldiers. His courage, and the courage of so many others like him, helped the Allies stop the Axis powers and defeat them in World War II. Now, it's important for us to remember as we celebrate this man that we celebrate him because he stood by his convictions and he lived according to the commands of Jesus Christ. He was heroic not necessarily because he didn't kill, but because he followed the commands of Jesus. He loved Jesus, he loved his country, and he showed it on the battlefield. Doss was awarded with the Medal of Honor after the war, and he suffered from a lifelong sickness because of the war that caused him to lose one of his lungs, but he lived all the way to the age of 87, finally passing away in March of 2006. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.